In less than 10 minutes, Jimmy Swaggart accomplished what countless critics had failed to do for decades. He cornered Maxine Waters so completely that the television studio gasped in disbelief. What began as a calm exchange on values and accountability quickly turned into a direct assault on her credibility. And just when it seemed Waters might recover, Swaggart unveiled something so personal, so explosive, that the live audience erupted. Stay tuned, because the family connection he exposed changed everything. The program was meant to be just another evening of debate, polished introductions, rehearsed talking points, the usual back and forth that faded as soon as the cameras went dark. Yet from the moment the host welcomed the guests, an electric tension filled the air, a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. Cameramen adjusted their focus, producers whispered frantically in the control room, and the live audience leaned forward, sensing drama. Maxine Waters strode onto the stage with the confidence of a veteran, her commanding presence and sharp tongue making her a familiar face to millions. To her, this was simply another chance to defend her record, a performance she had mastered over decades. Across from her sat Jimmy Swaggart, calm and composed, his notes resting on the table but his focus unshakable. To some, he might have seemed an unlikely challenger, a preacher, not a politician, but those who knew him recognized the steel beneath his soft Southern cadence. Swaggart wasn't there for theatrics or viral moments. He was there to question the very foundation of Waters' long-held claims, and he was prepared to do it with a clarity that left no room for evasion. The show began with polite remarks about public service and responsibility, voices blending into the familiar hum of televised debate. But when Swaggart leaned toward his microphone, the atmosphere shifted. His voice, steady and deliberate, cut through the noise. "Congresswoman Waters," he began, his drawl carrying both warmth and weight, "you've spoken passionately about fighting corporate greed and protecting the people. My question is simple. Can you show us, here and now, what proves that your work has always been free from personal gain?" The studio fell still. It wasn't the sort of question typically asked on such programs, where vague generalities usually filled the air. Swaggart's inquiry was different, rooted in principle and aimed directly at the heart of Waters' authority. It demanded an answer, not a deflection. Waters adjusted her glasses, her smile measured but confident, as if she had faced this kind of challenge countless times before. "Reverend Swaggart," she replied smoothly, "I have dedicated my life to public service. My record speaks for itself. I've always acted in the best interest of the American people." Swaggart nodded slowly, his expression unreadable, as if he had anticipated the response. He gestured to the big screen behind him. "I hear your words, Congresswoman. But words are not proof, and tonight we're going to look at something much harder to dismiss." A ripple moved through the audience. The first salvo had been fired, and everyone in the studio knew this clash was only beginning. Every major defense Waters had given over the years rested on the same foundation. Jimmy Swaggart leaned closer to his microphone, his tone calm but unyielding, his southern drawl sharpening the weight of his words. "That may be true in practice, Congresswoman," he said, "but precedent doesn't always mean integrity. If we keep stretching trust without clear limits, where does that authority end? Who holds us accountable when influence is pushed too far?" The studio air thickened, tension pressing down like a storm cloud. Waters shifted in her seat, her fingers tightening briefly on the cue cards she clutched. "We are accountable to the people," she shot back, her voice rising slightly, "and the people demand stronger protections against greed." Swaggart's reply came swiftly, his voice steady, gentle but piercing in its clarity. "But when protection turns into overreach, when power goes unchecked, the people lose more than they gain. Isn't that the very abuse Scripture warns us against, when shepherds turn into wolves?" The audience buzzed, whispers swelling into a tide. Cameras zoomed in, capturing Waters' tightened jaw and Swaggart's unflinching gaze. For the first time that night, Waters seemed unsettled, not silenced, but cornered. The host shifted uncomfortably, attempting to move the discussion along, but it was too late. The spark had been lit, and the crowd was alive with anticipation. Swaggart leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving Waters. "I'll have more questions," he said softly, his tone carrying a promise that rippled through the studio. Waters forced a smile, but it looked thinner than before. I welcome your questions, Reverend. I have nothing to hide. The audience didn't quite believe her. The whispers grew louder, some viewers shaking their heads, others murmuring to each other. The producers flashed graphics onto the studio screen, a report projected for everyone to see. This, Swaggart said, gesturing toward the display, isn't my opinion. It's public record, a detailed report showing repeated instances where influence crossed into self-interest. Congresswoman Waters, in your testimony you spoke about defending Americans from exploitation. Yet here, in black and white, are examples where your reach directly benefited those closest to you. How do you reconcile that with the message you're selling tonight? Waters frowned, glancing at the screen without looking directly at it. Her voice was measured but strained. These records are context-specific. They don't undermine the broader service I've given for decades. Swaggart's response was steady, his preparation evident in every word. But context matters, Congresswoman. If integrity has been compromised before, doesn't that set a precedent? Shouldn't we be cautious about repeating the same patterns? The audience shifted again, whispers swelling louder. The camera cut close to Waters, her eyes narrowing. Reverend, you're cherry-picking examples to fit your narrative, she said sharply. The American people need protection from bad actors, not lectures on morality. Swaggart didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, resolute. With respect, this isn't about theory, it's about accountability. Every time a leader stretches their reach unchecked, trust erodes. And trust isn't a theory, it's the safeguard of liberty. The studio fell silent, the weight of his words heavy in the air. Waters leaned forward, her voice tight. Are you questioning my integrity? Swaggart's reply was immediate, his tone unwavering. I'm questioning unchecked authority, Congresswoman, because authority, when left unchallenged, becomes abuse. And history shows us exactly what happens when service turns into self-service. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of cameras. The host tried again to interject, but Swaggart cut in, polite yet firm. I'm not finished. He turned back to Waters, his words softening, but his precision razor-sharp. You've built a career on speaking truth to power, and that's commendable. But tonight, I'm asking whether you'll let that same principle apply to yourself. Can you prove right now that your choices are driven solely by the people's interest? Waters hesitated. Just a flicker, a pause no longer than a breath. But in the charged atmosphere of the live broadcast, it was deafening. The cameras caught it. The audience caught it. Viewers at home would have seen it too, the tremor of doubt in her eyes. My record speaks for itself, she said finally, her voice firm but tinged with unease. I have always acted in service of the people. It was an answer, but not the one the room expected. The tension grew thicker, a sense that something deeper was stirring, something Jimmy Swaggart knew and was prepared to bring into the light. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable, letting the silence do its work. We'll revisit this, he said quietly, his words carrying the weight of a promise. The studio buzzed with whispers. Viewers in the live audience exchanged urgent glances. Phones lit up as social media began to pulse with speculation. Waters shuffled her notes, her composure strained, her smile now reduced to a thin line. What had begun as a debate on policy was no longer about regulations. It had become a battleground of principles, with Swaggart calmly but relentlessly setting the stage for a reckoning that threatened to shake her reputation to its core. The air was thick with anticipation, the promise of revelations yet to come. Every eye in the studio was fixed on the two figures across from each other, every word amplified by the intensity of the moment. Swaggart leaned toward his microphone again, his tone steady, but his phrasing tighter, more deliberate. Congresswoman Waters, he said, earlier you dismissed concerns about financial entanglements as exaggerated. Yet multiple records, broadcast here tonight, show your office has maintained ongoing connections to institutions or is directly impacted by your decisions. How do you explain to the public that these ties do not color your judgment? Waters snapped her head up. That accusation is baseless, she shot back. I will not allow hearsay to undermine decades of service. Swaggart didn't retreat. It isn't hearsay, Congresswoman. It's public record. And the people who trusted you deserve assurance that decisions aren't being shaped in private boardrooms before they're presented as public policy. The crowd stirred audibly, murmurs rippling through the studio. Cameras zoomed in as the tension sharpened. I've dedicated my career to fighting corporate greed, Waters declared, her voice rising. To suggest otherwise is an insult not just to me, but to the people I serve. Swaggart remained unshaken, his calm delivery contrasting with her rising pitch. His southern cadence carried a layer of folksy wisdom that struck deeper than anger could. Then surely, he said evenly, you'll welcome scrutiny. If your service is as unassailable as you claim, transparency should vindicate you, not threaten you. The tension cracked. Waters slammed her hand lightly against the table. I will not be cross-examined as though I were on trial. Gasps broke out from the audience, a rare loss of composure from someone known for control. Swaggart didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The contrast between his calm precision and her eruption only deepened the impact of every word. You are not on trial, he said, his voice steady, but accountability is not optional. If we demand it of corporations and banks, we must demand it of ourselves. The words landed like a gavel strike. For a moment, the studio was silent, except for the clicking of cameras and the hum of live stream feeds rushing across the internet. Waters leaned forward, her eyes flashing. And who holds you accountable, Reverend? Who questions your motives? Swaggart didn't blink. The same people who hold you accountable, the American people. And tonight they are watching closely. They see not only what we say, but how we respond when pressed. That's where trust is built, or lost. The audience stirred again, some leaning in wide-eyed, others shaking their heads at the ferocity of the exchange. I've done nothing to betray that trust, Waters insisted, her voice firmer now, though the tremor underneath betrayed the strain. Swaggart's reply was quiet, almost surgical. Then the truth should have no need for defense. The silence that followed was deafening. Waters' jaw tightened, her hands gripping the table too firmly. She had weathered countless interviews, countless debates. But this one was different. It cut closer than she had expected, and the cracks were beginning to show. The cameras caught her stiff posture, her eyes darting as Swaggart prepared his next move with the same calm precision he had displayed since the beginning. Congresswoman Waters, Swaggart said, his voice steady but unmistakably firmer now. You've reminded us today of your long record in public service. No one disputes the years you've given. But length of service does not exempt anyone from accountability. If anything, it demands more of it. Waters forced a tight smile. And I have nothing to hide. Swaggart let the words linger before responding. Then let's talk about influence. Not abstract, not theoretical, but tangible. Because the people don't just want speeches. They want assurance that their representatives act free of personal entanglements. Waters narrowed her eyes. Are you questioning my integrity again? Swaggart didn't look away. His voice was steady, his gaze unwavering. I'm questioning whether the line between public duty and private interest has always been clear. Specifically, whether leaders can truly claim impartiality when their own families stand to benefit from the choices they make. The studio stirred. The words landed heavy, like a thunderclap. The phrase landed with weight heavier than anything Jimmy Swaggart had said all evening. The live audience leaned forward. Even the host, usually calm, raised his eyebrows, while the cameramen zoomed in instinctively. Waters' smile faltered. I won't dignify vague insinuations, she snapped. Swaggart leaned slightly closer to his microphone, his tone unwavering. It isn't vague, it's direct. The public has a right to know whether family connections influence your judgment. That's not an accusation. It's a question of transparency. A murmur spread across the studio. Viewers at home watching live would have seen Waters' posture stiffen, her hands tightening around her cue cards. Family, she said sharply, is not on trial here. My family has nothing to do with my record. Swaggart's reply was calm, almost surgical. Our families shape us, Congresswoman. But when financial interests overlap with public authority, the people deserve clarity. Because trust rests not only on what we do, but on who benefits when we do it. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. The audience could feel it. This wasn't a stray remark. It was deliberate, a direction impossible to ignore. Waters finally spoke, her voice taut. "You are skating dangerously close to slander." Swaggart's gaze didn't waver. Truth cannot be slander. And truth, Congresswoman, has a way of surfacing, whether we are ready or not. The studio erupted in whispers, the sound swelling like a tide. Some leaned in with anticipation. Others sat back, stunned by the audacity of the exchange. For a moment, the two sat locked in silence, their stares clashing like drawn swords under the harsh studio lights. Swaggart broke it first, his voice softer now, almost deliberate. "I'll return to that, because the people watching tonight deserve an answer. Not from me, from you." With that, he leaned back, letting the words hang in the air like a storm cloud waiting to break. The silence was deceptive, like the stillness before thunder. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of expression. The energy was raw, unsettled. "Congresswoman Waters," Swaggart pressed on, his voice sharper now, "when I raised the issue of family connections, you dismissed it as irrelevant. Yet countless Americans face scrutiny in their workplaces over conflicts of interest far smaller than what we're seeing here. Why should their standards be higher than ours?" Waters straightened her papers with deliberate force, her smile tightening. "Because I have dedicated my life to public service. That distinction matters. To compare my family to corporate entanglements is misleading and unfair." Swaggart tilted his head slightly, his expression calm. "Service is measured not by years, but by integrity. And when questions of influence arise, brushing them aside only deepens public doubt. Don't you think the people watching deserve transparency, not dismissal?" The audience stirred again, a low buzz cutting through the quiet. The cameras panned closer, catching the faint tremor in Waters' jaw as she prepared her rebuttal. "This is a distraction," she snapped, her voice carrying more heat. "We are here to discuss policy, not my personal life." Swaggart's reply was steady, softer than before, yet sharper in effect. "And yet, Congresswoman, policy affects millions. If those policies are shaped by personal interests, family or otherwise, then it becomes everyone's concern." The room shifted again. Reporters scribbled furiously. Social media feeds exploded with hashtags, sensing the magnitude of the moment. "I will not allow you to drag my family into this." Waters struck the table lightly, the sound echoing across the studio. Swaggart didn't flinch. "I haven't dragged them in. The record has. The connections exist. The question is whether you will address them openly or continue to evade." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the host glanced nervously at the producers, while some in the audience muttered. Others applauded Swaggart's persistence. "You are out of line, Reverend," Waters said, her voice rising. "Completely out of line." Swaggart's eyes never wavered. "The line is drawn by ethics, by public trust. And if asking questions to defend that trust is out of line, then perhaps we need to redraw the line." The studio buzzed louder now, voices clashing in low whispers. Waters leaned back in her chair, her breathing sharper, her voice strained. "I have nothing more to say on this matter." Swaggart paused, letting the silence settle again. "The people will hear more, whether from you here or from the evidence itself later. One way or another, the truth comes out." The words landed heavy, undeniable. Waters shifted, avoiding eye contact for the first time that night. It was clear to everyone in the room. The unraveling had begun. The air in the studio felt suffocating, thick with tension pressing down on every shoulder. The live audience sat frozen, pens and phones hovering midair, as if afraid any sound might shatter the silence. Swaggart leaned forward once more, his voice cutting through the stillness. "Congresswoman Waters," Jimmy Swaggart's voice rang steady through the studio, "you've denied time and again that your family plays any role in your decisions. But the evidence tells a different story. Records show that your daughter's consulting firm received lucrative contracts from institutions that stood to benefit directly from your influence." Gasps erupted from the live audience. Cameras flashed. Producers waved frantically in the control booth. and social media feeds lit up in real time. The words cut through the program like a blade. "That is an outrageous lie." Waters slammed her hand against the table, her voice rising. But Swaggart didn't falter. "The contracts are documented. The payments are recorded. This is not hearsay. It is fact. And the American people deserve to know if their trust has been traded for personal gain." The studio exploded with sound. Whispers, shouts, the host desperately asking for order. Waters' face flushed, her words tumbling over themselves. "This is a smear campaign, an attack on my family." Swaggart leaned forward, his voice calm against the chaos. "No, Congresswoman. This is accountability. Families of public servants are not above scrutiny when their financial ties intersect with public responsibility. Integrity demands transparency, no matter how uncomfortable it may be." The audience's energy surged. Some sat in stunned silence. Others whispered fiercely, phones buzzing as hashtags like #WatersScandal and #SwaggartTruth shot across trending lists. Waters' voice cracked as she tried to respond. "I will not answer to baseless accusations on live television." Swaggart's reply was final, his tone cutting like steel. "Then you answer to the people, because the truth is already out. And once truth enters the light, no denial can erase it." The crowd roared, some shouting, some applauding, the sound swallowing the host's attempts to quiet the studio. Waters sat stiff, her jaw tight, her eyes locked on the desk before her. The aura of control she had carried onto the stage was gone, replaced with a silence louder than any rebuttal. Swaggart remained composed, his posture steady, his expression unreadable. He had said what he came to say, and now he let the weight of it settle. When the noise finally subsided, he spoke one last time, deliberate and resolute. "Public service is not about power. It's about trust. And when that trust is compromised, no denial, no outrage can restore it. The people deserve better." With that, he leaned back, leaving the studio in stunned silence. The damage was done, the revelation made, and outside those walls, millions were already debating what it all meant. The legacy of Maxine Waters had been shaken to its core. What had begun as a televised discussion had become something far greater, a piercing examination of ethics and accountability. Swaggart, calm and deliberate to the end, had ensured that the truth would not be ignored. The broadcast, meant to be routine, had transformed into a crucible of tension, the air thick with consequence. Across from him, Waters gripped her papers, her earlier confidence replaced with visible defensiveness. Cameras captured every flicker of expression, every tremor in her voice. Swaggart had shifted the narrative from empty rhetoric to a defining moment in public trust. As he leaned once more toward the microphone, his words silenced the murmurs. "Congresswoman Waters, you said your family has no bearing on your decisions, yet the record shows otherwise. The people deserve an answer. How can they trust you if those closest to you are the ones profiting most?" The audience erupted again. Gasps, shouts, applause. Waters' eyes widened before narrow-washing, on her voice rising with indignation. "That is an outrageous accusation, Reverend. You're dragging my family into this to smear my name." Swaggart remained unshaken, his expression calm but resolute. "It's not an accusation, Congresswoman. It's fact. Public filings show your daughter's firm received contracts from institutions affected by your decisions. The people deserve to know whose interests you truly serve." The studio shook with tension, every eye fixed on the confrontation. Waters slammed the table again, but her words rang hollow. Swaggart's voice cut through, steady and piercing. "If your work is for the people, then transparency should be your ally. If these connections are above board, why not face them openly? Why let doubt linger in the public's mind?" The silence that followed was devastating. Waters' composure cracked, her hands trembling around her notes. "I will not dignify this with a response," she snapped, her voice thin. Swaggart leaned back, his final words carrying like a vow. "The scandal isn't in the question, Congresswoman. It's in the silence. And the people are watching." The stage was set, the unraveling complete. You've said your family has no bearing on your decisions, Jimmy Swaggart declared, his tone calm but cutting. Yet the record shows clear financial ties. The American people deserve an answer. How can they trust that your work serves them and not those who profit from your influence? Waters' face flushed, her voice sharp but brittle. This is an attack, Reverend, a disgraceful attempt to smear my name and my family. Her words came fast but lacked the conviction of earlier exchanges, betraying a crack in her armor. Swaggart didn't raise his voice. His tone was steady as ever. It's not an attack, Congresswoman. It's accountability. When public trust is at stake, no one, not you, not me, is above scrutiny. If these ties are innocent, let transparency prove it. The studio fell silent, the weight of his words settling like a stone. Reporters scribbled furiously, their headlines already forming. Viewers online flooded social media with live reactions. Waters leaned forward, her voice trembling with indignation. I've served this country for decades fighting for the vulnerable. I won't let you twist that legacy into something it's not. Swaggart's response was measured, almost gentle, but piercing. A legacy is only as strong as the truth behind it. If that truth is solid, no question should shake it. But if it isn't, no denial can hide it. The crowd buzzed again, whispers swelling as the magnitude of the moment settled in. The host tried to calm the noise, but Swaggart raised his hand politely. With respect, this is the agenda, he said firmly. Public trust is the foundation of leadership. If we can't uphold it, what are we even doing here? The audience stilled, his words cutting through the noise like a blade. Cameras zoomed in on Waters as she adjusted her papers, her hands shaking slightly, her eyes avoiding his steady gaze. I have nothing more to say, she whispered, her voice low, almost defeated. Swaggart leaned back, his expression unreadable, letting the silence speak louder than any words. Then let the record speak, he said quietly, because the people watching here and at home will decide what this means. They'll judge not just our words, but our willingness to face the truth. The studio erupted once more, a wave of gasps and murmurs sweeping through the crowd. Phones buzzed, live feeds exploded, and millions of viewers shared clips within seconds. Waters sat stiff, her once unshakable aura fractured, her silence louder than any rebuttal. Swaggart, by contrast, remained steady, his southern cadence and unyielding logic turning the broadcast into a defining moment. He spoke one final time, his voice deliberate, resonating with a clarity that filled the air. Public service isn't about power or prestige. It's about trust. And when that trust is broken, by action or by silence, it undermines everything we stand for. The people deserve leaders who don't just preach accountability, but live it every day, no matter how uncomfortable the truth may be. The studio fell utterly silent, the weight of his words settling like a solemn vow. Integrity, he made clear, was not just a virtue, it was the very foundation of leadership, and no one, regardless of tenure or reputation, was exempt. As the cameras kept rolling, Waters gathered her papers with visible restraint, while Swaggart calmly organized his notes. The program had ended, but its impact had only begun. Beyond the studio, the nation was already reckoning with the revelations, debates on trust and accountability spreading far beyond the broadcast. The lesson endured long after the lights dimmed. Swaggart's unwavering commitment to truth reminded viewers that democracy, faith, and leadership all survive only when those in power face scrutiny and place the people's trust above personal gain. It was more than a scandal. It was a reminder that integrity is not merely a virtue, but the bedrock of a society worthy of its people.